Year 2, Part 9. Uncle Horace's letter added to the pleasant excitement. Uncle Horace, who had been living as a retired sea captain in Vancouver, was coming home for a visit for the first time in 20 years. The older folk were naturally the more deeply stirred by this. Judy, for a little while, was neither to hold nor bind. But Pat and Ray were intrigued, too, at the thought of this mysterious, romantic uncle they had never seen, about whom Judy had told so many yarns. The Horace of the black ink fruitcake, and the monkey, and the mutiny off Bombay. The man who, so Judy had said, kept the winds in jars. They had believed that once, and the charm of it still hung around their thoughts of him. She had mentioned Wednesday as the probable day of his arrival, and on Tuesday Pat subjected Silverbush to such a furbishing up that Sid asked sarcastically if Uncle Horace were coming to see them or their furniture. "It's what ye are to do with them blessed cats to be puzzling me," worried Judy. "Your Uncle Horace hates cats as bad as old Cousin Nicholas himself could do." "Oh, do you remember Cousin Nicholas coming downstairs that rainy Christmas night little Mary was born?" giggled Ray. "Remember, is it? Oh, could I ever be forgetting him, standing there looking like the wrath of God? And now we do be having 3 to keep out of Horace's way. To be sure, Gentleman Tom won't be bothering him much, but Bold and Bad and that Skudunk are so friendly. We'll just have to see that the door of the poet's room is kept tight shut, and trust the rest to the good man above. It's the lucky thing we've got rid of Pupka." Pat did not know if it were so lucky. It had half broken her heart to give Pupka away to the distant cousin down at East Point. He was such a beautiful cat with his fluffy Maltese coat and white paws, and so affectionate. Why, he used to go over the house at night, visit all the bedrooms, and kiss all the sleepers. And the purrs of him! He could out-purr Bold and Bad and Skidunk together. It was a shame to give him away, but Long Alec was adamant. 3 cats were enough, more than enough, for any house. He would really like to be sure of an occupied chair once in a while. Popka must go, and Popka went. Pat and Ray both cried when his new owner bore him away, shrieking piteously in a basket. Uncle Horace did not come Wednesday, nor Thursday or Friday. Long Alec shrugged disappointingly. Likely he had changed his mind at the last minute and wouldn't come at all. That was Horace all over. "But if he does come, I want all of you folks to mind your P's and Q's," said Long Alec warningly. "Horace is a bit peculiar in some ways. He was a regular martinet on board ship, I understand. Everything had to be just so, running smooth as oil, and he was just the same about a house. That's why he never married. He told us the last time he was home, couldn't find a wife neat enough. It's all very well to listen to Judy's yarns of his pranks. He used to be a rip for them, I admit, but nobody else was to play them, and accidents had no place in his scheme of things. I don't know what he'll think of your dance. The last time he was home, he was badly down on dancing." "And him the liveliest dancer on the island 40 years ago," marvelled Judy. "He's reformed since then, and the reformed ones are generally the stiffest. Anyhow, all of you do your best to keep things moving smoothly. I don't want Horace to go away thinking things not lawful to be uttered of my household." Pat and Ray promised, and then forgot all about him in the excitement of the party preparations. Hundreds of last-minute things to do. Cream to be whipped, floors and furniture to be polished, at the very last an extra cake to be made because Pat was afraid they mightn't have enough. Judy declared that the Queen's pantry couldn't be better stocked, but gave in when Pat insisted. Oh, you do be the mistress here," she said, with a touch of grandeur. Pat made an old-fashioned jelly roll that would cut into golden coils with ruby jelly between them. A pretty cake, just as pretty as any newfangled thing. Where on earth was Ray? Prinking in her room, of course, fussing over her hair, and so much yet to be seen to. Pat had always been conscious of a sneaking sympathy with Martha, but she was very happy. Silverbush looked beautiful. She loved the shining surfaces, the flowers in bowls all over the house, the glitter of glass and silver in the dining room, everything in the best gardener tradition. Sid had strung Chinese lanterns on the trees all around the platform, and Tillytuck was to be fiddler, with old Matt Corrigan from the bridge to spell him. The day of gold would be followed by a night of silver, for the weather was behaving perfectly, and at dusk pretty girls and girls not so pretty were gazing into mirrors all over the two glens and Silverbridge and Bay Shore. Judy, with groans that could not be uttered, was donning her wine-hued dress, and Tillytuck was struggling into a white collar in the granary loft. Even the cats were giving their flanks a few extra licks, for the party at Silverbush was easily the event of the season. Pat, hurrying into a frock of daffodil chiffon, fluffed out her dark brown cloud of hair and looked in her mirror with pleasure. She was feeling a trifle tired, but her reflection heartened her up wonderfully. She had forgotten that she was really rather pretty. Nay, beauty, of course. Pat had never forgotten great-great-Aunt Hannah's dictum, but quite pleasant to look upon. And Ray, in her dress of delphinium blue, was a dream. Blue is really the loveliest color in the world, thought Pat. I'm sorry I can never wear it. The dress suited Ray, but for that matter, any dress did. Ray's clothes always seemed to belong to her. You could never imagine anyone else wearing them. Once she slipped the dress over that rippling gold-brown head, you thought she must have been born in it. Pat reflected with a thrill of pride that she had never seen this darling sister looking so lovely. Her eyes had such starry lights in them behind her long lashes, eyes that were as full of charm as wood violets. To be sure, Ray wouldn't have wanted her eyes compared to wood violets, or forget-me-nots either. That was Victorian. Cornflower blue. Now, that sounded so much more up-to-date. Don Robinson had told her at the last club dance that her eyes were cornflower blue. The Binnies were the first to come, spying out the land, Judy vowed. They heard May's laughter far down the lane. You always hear her for you see her, that one, sniffed Judy. May was very gorgeous in a gown of cheap mail-order radium lace that broke in billows around her feet and afforded a wonderful view of most of the bones in her spine. She tapped Pat condescendingly on the shoulder and said, "You look dragged to death, darling. If I were you, I'd stay in bed all day tomorrow. Ma always makes me do that after a spree." Pat shrugged away from that hateful, fat, dimpled hand with its nails-stained coral. What an intolerable phrase, "if I were you." As if a Binny ever could be a gardener. She was thankful that the arrival of the Russells and Uncle Brian's girls saved her from the necessity of replying. Winnie was looking like a girl again tonight, in spite of her 2 children, for there was a new baby at the Bay Shore, and Judy was going to take care of it during the evening, as she loved to do. Pat did not dance till late. There were too many things to see to, and even when she was free, she liked better to stand a little in the background, where a clump of stately white foxglove spikes glimmered against the edge of the birches, and glowed over the whole scene. Everything was going beautifully. The dreamy August night seemed like a cup of fragrance that had spilled over. The gay lilt of Tillytuck's fiddle rippled through the moonlight to die away magically, through green, enchanted boughs, into the beautiful silences of the silver bush and the misty, glimmering fields beyond. It was really a wonder that Wild Dick didn't rise up out of his grave to dance to it. The platform, full of flower-like faces and flower-like dresses, looked so pretty. Everybody seemed happy. How sweet darling Mother looked, sitting among the young folks like a fine white queen, her gold-brown eyes shining with pleasure. Uncle Tom was as young as anybody, dancing as blithely as if he had never heard of Mrs. Merridew. His beard had grown out in all of its old magnificence, and the streaks of gray in it did not show in that mellow light. What a lovely dress Suzanne was wearing! Green crepe and green lace swirling about her feet. Suzanne was not really pretty. She said so herself, that she had a mouth like a gargoyle, but she was distinguished looking, a friend to be proud of. May Binney, with all her flashing, full-blown beauty, looked almost comical beside her. Poor Rex Miller was not there. At home sulking, Pat thought with a regretful shrug. She had not exactly refused him 2 evenings before. Pat did not often actually have to refuse her lovers. She was, as Judy would have said, too diplomatic-like, but she had the knack of delicately making them understand a certain thing, and thus avoiding for herself and them the awkwardness of a blunt no. Where was Sid's Dorothy, with her sweet dark face? She had not come either. Pat wondered why. She hated herself for half hoping Sid and Dorothy had quarreled. But if that were the reason Sid was dancing so often with May Binney, Pat felt she was already punished for her selfish hope. Of course, May was a good dancer, of her kind. At any rate, the boys all liked to dance with her. May was never in any danger of being a wallflower. Amy's new ring flashed on the shoulder of her partner as she drifted by. Amy was engaged. Another change. What a pity people had to grow up and get married and go away. She had always liked Amy much better than Norma. She recalled with considerable relish the time she had slapped Norma's face for making fun of Silverbush. Norma never dared to do it again. What an exquisite profile Ray had as she lifted her face to her partner. A tall Silverbridge boy. Ray had no lack of partners either, and the way she had of looking at them, really, the child was getting to be quite a handful. Was there actually anybody standing back in the shadows behind Tilly Tuck? Pat had fancied several times there was, but could never be quite sure. Probably Uncle Tom's hired man. David hunted her out and insisted on her dancing, and sitting out in the silver bush with him afterwards, just far enough away from the dancers to make Tilly Tuck's fiddling sound like fairy music. Pat liked both. David was a capital dancer, and she loved to talk with him. He had such a charming voice. Sometimes he was a little bitter, but there was such a stimulating pungency about his bitterness, like choke cherries. They puckered your mouth horribly, but still you hankered after them. She would far rather sit here and talk to David than dance with the boys who held you closer than you liked and paid you silly compliments, most of which they had picked up from their talkies. Then a run into the house to see the baby. It was so heavenly to watch a baby asleep, with Judy crooning over it like an old weather-beaten Madonna. Judy was a bit upset on several counts. "Patsy, darling, there do be some couples spooning on the flat monuments in the graveyard. Do you be thinking that decent now?" "It's not in the best of taste, but we can hardly turn them out of it, Judy. It's only on Wild Dick's and Weeping Willie's. Wild Dick would sympathize with them, and as for Weeping Willie, who cares for his feelings? We don't count him among our glorious dead. Sitting down and crying instead of going bravely to work. Is that all that's worrying you, Judy?" "It's not worrying I am, but there's been a mysterious disappearance. The roll jelly cake has gone out of the pantry, and the bowl of whipped cream in the ice house is gone. Siddy forgot to lock it. Bolden bad to be licking his chops very suspicious like, but he'd have been leaving the bowl at least. Of course, I can be whipping up more cream in a brace of shakes, but who could have took the cake, Patsy? Never did the like happen before." "I suppose some of the boys have been playing tricks. Never mind, Judy, there's plenty of cake. You said so yourself." "But the impudence of them, coming into my pantry like that. Likely enough it was Sam Binney, Patsy darling. Rex Miller isn't here. You haven't been quarrelling with him, have you now? No, Judy darling, but he won't be coming around any more. I couldn't help it. He was nice. I liked him, but Judy, don't be looking like that. When I asked him a question, any question, I always knew exactly what he'd answer. And he never, really never, Judy, laughs in the right place. Maybe you could have told him to laugh in the right place, said Judy sarcastically. I don't think I could. One has to be more knowing that. So I had to wave him gently away, symbolically speaking. Oh, you'll be doing that once too often, me jewel, predicted Judy darkly. Judy, this love business is no end of a bother. In life's morning march, when my bosom was young, I thought it must be tremendously romantic, but it's just a nuisance. Life would be much simpler if there were nothing of the sort. Oh, simple is it? A bit dull, I'm thinking. I've never had any love affairs myself to speak of, but the fun I've had watching other people's. Pat had been able to sidetrack Rex Miller diplomatically, but she was not so fortunate with Samuel McLeod, probably because it had never occurred to her that he had any intentions regarding her. Samuel, nobody ever called him Sam, it simply couldn't be done, came now and again to Silverbush to confer with Pat and Ray on the programs of the Young People's Society, of which he was president, but no one, not even Judy, ever looked upon him as a possible beau. And now, after supper, having asked Pat to dance, Ray said that dancing with Samuel was almost as solemn a performance as leading the young people's. He followed it up by asking her to go for a walk in the garden. Pat steered him past the graveyard, which he seemed to mistake for the garden, and got him into the delphinium walk. And standing there, even more dreadfully conscious of hands and feet than usual, he told her that his heart had chosen for the supreme object of its love, and that if she would like to be Mrs. Samuel McLeod, she had only to say the word. Pat was so dumbfounded that she couldn't speak at all at first, and it was not till Samuel, taking her silence for maidenly consent, began gingerly to put a long arm around her, that she came to the surface and managed to gasp out, "Oh, no, I don't think I can. I mean, I'm sure I can't. Oh, it's utterly impossible." As she spoke, there was a smothered giggle on the other side of the delphiniums, and Emmy Madison and Dot Robinson scuttled away across the lawn. "Oh, I'm so sorry," cried Pat. "I never thought anybody was there." "It doesn't matter," said Samuel, with a dignity that somehow did not misbecome him. "I am not ashamed to have people know that I aspired to you." In spite of his absurd Victorian phrases, Pat found herself for the first time rather liking him. He couldn't help being a South Glen McLeod. They were all like that, and she made up her mind that she would never entertain Judy or Suzanne by an account of this proposal, though to be sure that wretched Emmy and Dot would spread it all over the clan. All in all, Pat drew a breath of relief when the last guest had gone, and the last lantern candle expired, leaving the silver bush to its dreams and its moonlight. The party had been a tremendous success. "The nicest party I've ever been to," Suzanne whispered before she took the hill road. "And that supper? Come up tomorrow night, and we'll have a good pie-jaw about everything." But when you were hostess, there was, as Judy said, a bit of a strain, especially with the proposal of Samuel thrown in. She turned from the gate and ran up the back walk, crushing the damp mint as she ran. The late August night had grown a bit chilly, and Judy's kitchen, where a fire had been lit to brew the coffee, seemed attractive. Pat halted in the doorway in amazement. There were Uncle Tom and the aunts, Mother, Ray, Judy, Tilly Tuck, Dad, and Uncle Horace. for of course the stranger could be nobody else. Pat felt a little bit dazed as he rose to shake hands with her. This was not the Uncle Horace she had pictured, neither the genial old rascal of Judy's yarns, nor the typical tar of Dad's reminiscences. He was tall and thin and saturnine, with hair of pepper and salt. With his long, lean face and shell-rimmed spectacles, he looked more like a somewhat dyspeptic minister than a retired sea captain. To be sure, there was something about his mouth, and his keen blue eyes. Pat felt that she wouldn't have liked to head that mutiny against him. "This is Pat," said Long Alec. "I've been hearing things about you," grunted Uncle Horace as he shook hands. Pat hadn't a glimmer whether the things were complicated or the reverse, and retreated into herself. Uncle Horace, it seemed, had arrived unexpectedly, walking up from Silverbridge. Finding a party in full swing, he had decided not to show himself until it was over. "Had some fun watching the dance from the bush," he said. "Some pretty girls, clothed in smiles. Not much else. Never expected to see P.E.I. Island girls at a dance with no clothes on." "No clothes?" said Aunt Edith, rather staggered. She had not graced the party, but had come over to find out what was keeping Tom so late. "Well, none to speak of. There were 3 girls there with no back at all to their frocks. Times have changed since we were young, Alec." "For the better, I should think," said Ray pertly. "It must have been awful. Dresses lined and relined, sleeves as big as balloons, and rats in your hair." Uncle Horace looked at her meditatively, as if wondering what kind of an insect she was, fitted his fingertips carefully together, and went on with his tale. For the first time in her life, Ray Gardner felt squelched. "When I felt that I needed a little sustenance, I slipped into the pantry, when the coast was clear, and got me a cake, a real good cake, roll jelly. I didn't think they made them now. Then I scouted around for some milk and found a bowl of whipped cream in the ice house. Plenty more where that came from, thought I. Made a pretty decent meal." "And me blamin' Sam Binney," said Judy. Oh, I'll be begging his pardon, Binney and all as he is." "I kept back in the bush. Had to," said Uncle Horace. "If I moved, I fell over some canoodling couple. There were people in love all over the place." "Love is in the air at Silverbush, symbolically speaking," said Tilly Tuck. "I find it rather pleasant. Little girls' love affairs give a flavor to life." "But Judy here isn't married yet," said Uncle Horace gravely. Oh, I couldn't support the husband," sighed Judy. "Don't you think it's time?" said Uncle Horace gravely. "We're none of us getting younger, you know, Judy." "But I'm hoping some of us do be getting a little wiser," retorted Judy witheringly. But she was plainly in high cockalorum. Horace had always had a warm spot in her heart, and her eyes he was still a boy. "I got a drink of the old well while you were at the supper," said Uncle Horace in a different tone. "There's none like it in the world over. I've always understood David and his craving for a drink from the well at Bethlehem, and the ferns along the road from Silverbridge. I've smelled smells all the world over, east and west, and there's no perfume like the fragrance of spice ferns as you walk along a P.E.I. Island road on a summer evening. Well, young folks like your girls and Judy mayn't mind staying up all night, Alec, but I'm not equal to it any longer. Judy, do you suppose it's possible to have a fried chicken for breakfast?" "How like a man!" Ray telegraphed in disgust to Pat, expecting to have fried chicken for breakfast when it was 4 o'clock after a party. But Judy was actually looking pleased. "There do be a pair of young roosters out there just asking for it," she said meditatively. Judy and Pat and Ray had a last word when everybody had gone. Oh, but I'm falling like a bit of chewed string," sighed Judy. "However, the party was a grand success, and even Tilly Tuck, sitting down on a state of fly paper in the pantry, where he did have no business to be, and then strutting pompous like across the platform with it stuck to his pants, couldn't be called any reflection on Silverbush. He did be pretending to be mad about it, but I'm believing he did it on purpose to make a sensation. You could have knocked me down with a feather when I was after cleaning up in the supper dishes. It did be hearing a thud. There was my fine Horace, full length on the floor you rubbing us up so well, Patsy. Terrible slippery floor you've got, woman, was all he said. You never could be telling if Horace was mad or if he wasn't. I like him, said Pat, who had made up her mind about him when he talked of the well and the ferns. Pat, what on earth were you and Samuel McLeod doing in the garden? Asked Ray. Oh, just moonlighting, answered Pat, demure as an owl. I never saw anything so funny as the two of you dancing together. You looked like a windmill in a fit. Don't you be making fun of the poor boy, said Judy. He can't be helping his long arms and legs. At that, it do be better than being sawed off. And while he couldn't be said to talk, he does be managing to get things said. He gets them said all right, thought Pat, but she heroically contented herself with thinking of it.